The Jets aren't in hard knocks this year, but there was a few Jets nuggets that were very interesting. We'll talk about that, plus some more on the Hassan Reddick situation. Let's roll.
I'm going to lose my gas-darned bananas. Boy Green Daily starts now. Zoinks!
I made it clear that my intention was to play, and my intention was to play for the New York Jets.
That intro gets me every time. Thank you to Gator for that brand new intro, baby. And welcome to a Wednesday edition of Boy Green Daily, a daily New York Jets video show, also available wherever you get your podcasts. We got plenty to get to. We got our weekly guest here on the show. That is Nick Faria, baby, of Athlon Sports Pro Football Network and your favorite New York Jets insider. Let's bring him in. What's up, Nick?
How you doing, Paul? How's everything going?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very excellent. And hey, I just saw Schefter tweet out at like 4 or 5 this morning, whenever it was, that the Texans are the first team that have rookies and veterans today. So this party started, baby. Rookies are reporting for the Jets. Their rookies report tomorrow. I mean, we are here, baby. And next week we'll be talking practice and everything else that's coming up. It feels pretty good, man.
I feel like, and this happens every single year, where football fans, we get so much time off from the games itself. And I always joke with my wife saying that the 8-month reprieve from the NFL season is almost just a welcome sign for me and my heart palpitations throughout the entire year. But being able to finally see training camp, I mean, this is a great time. You got preseason games. Preseason games may not matter to a lot of people, but for the real diehard football fans, it's the first time we get to watch any sort of actual game action. This is just, it's a great time to be alive right now.
There's no doubt about it. So let's get into it. We'll start off with the Hard Knocks stuff yesterday. So episode 3 of the off-season edition of Hard Knocks, which is the first time ever. We've never had an off-season edition of Hard Knocks before. They're going through the off-season, so free agency and things of that nature. And boy, the Jets were heavily featured in last night's episode with a series of fascinating nuggets. We'll start off with the great, which was Tyrod Taylor. We didn't know, so we knew that Tyrod Taylor ended up with the Jets. Spoiler alert, by the way, for folks. I didn't mean to spoil that. Not sure if you've gotten that far in your life season, but that has already happened, so sorry about that. But the question was, how much did the Giants want him back? Because my radio partner, I can't wait to pelvic thrust in his face later today, but he was like, we didn't want Tyrod Taylor anyway. Well, not so fast. We also have a full column in the YouTube description talking about this, but Shane in his office, one-on-one with Brian Dable, Joe Shane, the GM for the Giants, says, Tyrod Taylor's our number 1 quarterback option. They're talking about this during the legal tampering period. And then Dable's like, well, let's go through the names. And they go, Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, Gardner Minshew. It goes through all the names. And Dable goes, I want Tyrod Taylor over all those guys. So it was clear they wanted Tyrod Taylor. But sorry, pal, but the feeling wasn't mutual. And he ended up picking the New York Jets. Fascinating here. And this is one of the biggest additions that, quite frankly, is not getting enough run of what we're talking about here for the New York Jets after the disaster that happened last year. So Tyrod Taylor, looks like the Giants were hot and heavy for double T in the morning, but they didn't get it.
They weren't the only ones either. Tyrod Taylor right now is, I would say, arguably a top 1 or 2 backup quarterback in the NFL right now, depending on where you see all these other young guys and in terms of their overall talent and potential. But from a sheer consistency basis, there are very few backup quarterbacks like Tyrod Taylor, and it's the reason why the Jets wanted to take him. The Jets knew going into the offseason that they were going to address the offensive line, they were going to address the receiver position, but they were also going to address the backup quarterback role, because even if Aaron Rodgers plays the majority of the season, you're going to want to give him at least a game or two to expect that an injury, a banged-up injury happens where he misses a game or two. Do you have the kind of backup quarterback that can win without, the full cast of characters being around and available. And Tyrod Taylor's ability, not just of being an accurate quarterback, but making plays happen with his leg is a reason why he's so important for a lot of backup quarterbacks and a lot of teams in the NFL. The Giants weren't the only ones. The Jets weren't the only ones interested in Tyrod Taylor. There were plenty of other teams that were interested in his services, but money talks. And the Jets paid him pretty handsomely for that 2-year deal to be able to be the backup to Aaron Rodgers. And I think Tyrod understands that Aaron Rodgers is not guaranteed to play a full 17 games. He is going to get his chances this year to see the field with Garrett Wilson, with Breece Hall. And when that happens, he needs to take advantage of it because that will only prolong his career even more.
And by the way, how could he not? So you're right. Tyrod Taylor's evaluating these options, and he sees this freaking Ferrari that is the New York Jets roster and says, well, they didn't have a driver last year, and Tyrod Taylor is, he's Dale Earnhardt Jr., baby. He's like, oh, put me behind that wheel. If Aaron Rodgers goes down, I'm ready to ride this puppy. Because you look at some of those other options, Tyrod got a lot of opportunities, obviously, last year with the array of things that were happening in the New York Giants quarterback room, and I don't blame him. Also, this is an insider thing that people say and talk about. So when a free agent is signed, the first thing we hear is normally the max value. Like when Tyron Smith, when he signed with the Jets, 1 year, $20 million deal, people are like, whoa, what an overpay by the New York Jets. He put a fine-tooth comb through that thing. You're like, oh, it's a 1 year, $6.5 million guaranteed deal with 13.5 in incentives. So like NC's like, oh, he had 18 million reasons. Well, it's really a 2-year deal for 12 million. That's incentives if he ends up playing a lot with 8.5 in guarantees. Again, the 8.5 is a lot. That was more than Tyron Smith. So take that for what it's worth. But they really wanted him. But I also just want to make it clear that they paid the price they paid. But it wasn't like the price that a lot of us were afraid of, that like with how many, I think it was 166 quarterbacks ended up somehow, or whatever the number was of quarterbacks that ended up appearing in games last year, or some wild 66 probably is more realistic. It was some wild number of guys, and everyone went, holy crap, everyone's going to be throwing money. We're going to see obscene numbers. And we really didn't, outside of Gardner Minshew, and they seemed to view him more as a starter. It seems like they got, relatively speaking, a good price for someone that, quite frankly, they absolutely needed.
It's around the same price, and I'm trying to remember how they signed him to the original deal, but it's around the same price that Philadelphia brought in Nick Foles for back in 2017 in free agency. I think right around there was like 2 years, $15 million. So very similar in money. And again, it's a fair deal overall because you, as a veteran for Tyrod Taylor, you know that you are going to have to come in, and the expectation is that you are going to be able to win when you're on the field. And when you have this talented roster as the Jets have, this is sort of the lightning rod that comes when you bring in a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, when you have protection like Tyron Smith, like Morgan Moses, young core of players in Joe Tippmann, Garrett Wilson, and Breece Hall. The Jets have done such an incredible job of building this roster from where it was 3 years ago, because we don't see Tyrod Taylor signing with New York specifically if the rest of the roster isn't overhauled like it has been. And that is a feather in the cap of Joe Douglas. That's a feather in the cap of Robert Saleh to build this cohesion, this locker room that is welcoming to a veteran like Tyron Smith, like Morgan Moses. So ultimately, the Tyrod Taylor thing to me is interesting because I think the Giants themselves, and you kind of see this throughout the free agent point, they vastly underrated the market for almost every free agent available, whether it was Xavier McKinney, Saquon, the guys that they did sign. I mean, the market themselves was just astronomically higher than the Giants expected, and it had me questioning what Joe Schoen was doing in the first place. I mean, John Runyon, the deal, and I'm sure we're going to get to him in a little bit, but the deal that he was given the Jets was pretty fair overall. And it was sort of the Aaron Rodgers discount that you heard, but the Giants seemed surprised at that deal. And it kind of just shows, even though someone is hired to be an executive and it's seen as a great hire, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is, because we talk about GMs having shaky starts and, uneven, consistent plans. I would take Joe Douglas's tenure over the last 3 years over Joe Schoen's every day of the week, and I don't think it's very close.
Yeah, we're in the same boat there. Yeah, it was, again, with this being the first ever offseason Hard Knocks in history, absolutely fascinating to hear as they went through the quarterbacks. They went, Sam Darnold's about a $4 million guy. Drew Lock's about a $4 million guy. Gardner's 10 to this. Like, their evaluations of the numbers, and obviously by the time we end up seeing the Hard Knocks, everything is already played out. So it's fascinating to see the cogs in the machine and how the Brian Burns trade. And again, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Obviously, I'm not a Giants guy, but I'm an NFL fan, and I've thoroughly enjoyed some of the behind the scenes here. We will get to Jon Runyan, but before we get to that, I am fascinated because I have the same question that one of our fans did here. It's NC, part of the Boy Green Coffee Club. Appreciate you, NC. How much will Taylor play in the preseason because he is this injury risk? And you think about the Jets quarterback room, which is the oldest quarterback room in football. Aaron Rodgers played like one series last year. That was the Giants game. You have Tyrod Taylor, who's 34, will be 35 in August. He's old. QB3 is like Jordan Travis, but we don't know his health status. If you have anything on that, feel free to share. And then Andrew Peasley is the other guy. So what is the plan for the QB rotation in preseason?
Well, I think it's a safe bet that Aaron Rodgers is not going to see the field during the preseason, especially now with all three preseason opponents having joint practices with the unit. Usually that's a sign that the starters are not going to play. Let's just put that out there right away. I think, Taylor, this is such an interesting question because we don't know specifically what their plan is going to be until next week when we sit with Robert Saleh. I would venture a guess to say that he is going to play a little bit of the first preseason game, a little bit more in the second preseason game, and then none in the third. Again, we talk about the injury concerns. Yes, that's going to be a big question mark. We don't know what Jordan Travis is going to bring in practices, but a lot of these questions are going to be answered early within the next week or so, week and a half. The one thing I will say is even though these players do have injury risk to them, there is incentive to put them in the preseason games just to get them acclimated overall. This isn't Tyron Smith we're talking about, where a guy that's been an all-pro for 10 years. We're talking about a backup quarterback that needs his reps like everything else. You look at some of the examples in the past where backup quarterbacks, they really start to struggle early on when they're thrown into action. But later on in the season, when they're having to play a little bit more, they actually become pretty good players overall because they've been given the reps necessary. That's where the preseason comes into play. They're not going to touch a football in months after the preseason and training camp. They're not getting the reps in practice. So ultimately, for Taylor specifically, it's important for him to get preseason work so he can be ready to go and he can hit the ground running should he need to see the field early and often during the regular season.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Again, he does not get the reps. Again, he got some last season because of the Giants quarterback situation, but he doesn't normally. So just putting him on ice completely and then saying, hey, we need you, Superman, that may be a complicated scenario. But let's get into it. That's the other Hard Knocks thing. So the Jets were not undefeated, right? Okay, they beat out the Giants, which I took great pleasure in. That the Giants wanted him and he didn't want them. He picked the Jets. Phenomenal. That's
the
terrific.
running theme for teams.
Yeah, that's for sure. But according to the Giants, two things here. Shane said that the Jets are after two of the same players they were, and those two players are Jermaine Illuminor, the former Las Vegas Raiders offensive lineman, and Jon Runyan, the former Green Bay Packers offensive lineman, are two guys that are chasing. We got a lot more intricate detail on the Runyan thing than the Illuminor thing, and it was this. I ended up taking notes last night and this morning. So the deal that the Jets ended up offering Runyan was a 2-year deal, $9 million per, with $17 million guaranteed. Giant staffer came in and revealed that information to Shane. Shane kind of sits there for a second and is trying to figure out whether they should match it, beat it. And one of the things that Giants person says is he tells Shane if he wants Runyan, they're going to have to beat the Jets offer because of the connections to Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers. And if they don't, he's just going to sign with the Jets. If they do, then it sounds like he will be signing with the Giants. So they end up increasing the offer. The Giants match the guarantees for the Jets, but they increase the deal to a 3-year deal and pay him $1 million per season. First off, we'll talk about the Runyan thing and then the ripple effects, because them not getting Runyan meant they got somebody else, so we could talk about that. But just in the Runyan vacuum of where the Jets offered, what the Giants ended up doing, what'd you make of that?
I think the Jets offer was probably the fairest overall because as solid as Runyan is as a blocker, as a guard, he's not this elite offensive lineman. And we saw a lot of guards go for some pretty high contracts throughout the off season. So ultimately, I thought the Giants kind of overpaid a little bit. I thought the Jets were right where they needed to be in terms of improving the left guard position with a player that wasn't some massive upgrade over Laken Tomlinson, but was a solid upgrade over Laken Tomlinson. Nothing, that would reshape the offensive line. But in doing so, in missing out on Runyon, missing out on Illuminor, you were able to use your resources to acquire not just John Simpson, who's a really good run blocker overall, but also being able to trade and keep Morgan Moses on the team for the upcoming season. And then you were able to bring in arguably the best left tackle of the last decade and a half in Tyron Smith. And even now, when healthy, Tyron Smith is an elite offensive lineman, an elite tackle in this game. This is not some far-fetched lunacy to say that the Jets missing out on 2 average to above average offensive linemen gave him the ability to bring in arguably the best of the free agent coup. So I look at this free agent class that the Jets have brought, and I think it's Joe Douglas's finest hour, potentially his last if the Jets are not able to be successful. And you were able to bring in a tackle, 2 tackles, not just 1, but 2 at a reasonable price that is less than or a little bit around the same as the 2 free agents the Giants brought in that are not even close to the level of dominance that Smith and Moses are. So I thought the Jets knocked it out of the park. I think both offers were fair. And it's interesting because we kind of know what the Jets offensive line is going to look like. We know that Tyron Smith's playing left tackle. We know that Morgan Moses is playing right tackle. Throughout the early portion of offseason workouts, we have seen Illuminor play left guard, John Runyon play right guard, and Evan Neal play right tackle, which kind of contradicts what we were hearing on Hard Knocks yesterday, because they said Illuminor's a tackle, Runyon's going to be the left guard, and in their natural positions. But they're being switched around early on in offseason workouts, and maybe that changes. They want to cross-train their guys, so be it. But as of right now, if you have Illuminor at left guard and you have Runyon at right guard and you're trusting Evan Neal to play a full 17-game season, this is a catastrophic misuse of resources for the Giants, because as good as these 2 guys are, they're playing out of position. How good are they going to be when they're playing out of position? This is where I say sometimes the simple answer is placing guys where they actually deserve to be. Keeping Elijah Vera Tucker at guard, having Morgan Moses play right tackle, making sure that Olu Fashanu is ready to play left tackle should something happen to Tyron Smith. The simple answers the Jets are giving are going to put them in a position to be successful throughout the 2024 season. The way things are going right now for the Giants, again, things can change at the start of training camp, but as of right now, I have a lot more questions about the Giants' offensive line than I do with the Jets.
Yeah, I just something to what you just said. It just feels good to know. We know who the starting 5 is for the Jets. We know who they are. We know where they're playing. All that is figured out. Last offseason, there was questions.
Oh, yeah.
Mekhi Becton, this, that, up, down, left, right, who's healthy, who's this, all this other jazz. And again, I'm not saying this offensive line is without questions. Certainly there's questions, but the answers to some of the pressing questions are already established, and that part of it feels fantastic to have for the 5. And yeah, I noticed that too. Like, for instance, Illuminor is someone, I will be honest, I was an advocate for him for Inns. I'm like, ooh, that could be a nice find in terms of value. But I'll be honest, I had no idea even Morgan Moses was a potential option. So when I got the ding on the phone, I'm like, Morgan Moses, sweet Lord have mercy. This is spectacular. And a guy who just, again, elite, you hear Robert Sauer said this a lot this offseason, elite locker room presence, and people have kind of giggled at that. But like, Morgan Moses is an elite locker room guy, and plus he's been incredibly reliable outside of obviously this torn pec last year, where he played through it. What a warrior. That I'm really excited about. He's a great person and a really good player when healthy. So that's exciting. Very, very exciting. All right, I want to get into this. So I called into the Rich Eisen show yesterday, Nick Faria, and I'm trying to hear more about the Hassan Reddick situation. It's eerily quiet. Or is it the eye of the storm? Is nothing happening? Is something happening? I don't know. So, Nick, I called in the Rich Eisen show yesterday, but Rich Eisen is not in. He's not in for the rest of this week. Instead, it was Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. So I'm going to play this footage, and he's going to give us some insights. He doesn't know everything. He says that right off the top, but he gave a couple interesting nuggets. I wonder if there's more to explore here, Nick. So let's roll the footage. I called yesterday into the Rich Eisen show, again, guest hosted by Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, to find out what the hell is going on with the Hassan Reddick situation. Let's roll the footage.
Paul in Syracuse, New York's been holding with us for like over an hour here. Paul, it's Tom Pelissero. What's going on?
Tommy P. It's great to be here, and shout out, I don't even know if I could do this, to the boys in the studio. Phenomenal.
Hey, yeah, all right.
Hey. What's up, Paul?
Okay, well, yeah, I guess my question here, Tommy P., is on the Hassan Reddick New York Jets situation. Not a lot of people are talking about it. What's happening? Is he getting a contract extension? Is he getting some sort of a sweetener deal? What's happening with Hassan Reddick and the New York Jets?
It's a good question, Paul. Thanks very much for the call. They've got a few more days here, week or so before the Jets.
Okay, I think something happened there with the footage. Either way, I'll just cut to the chase here. That's right, technical difficulties. But I asked Tom Pelissero, what's the deal going on? He said he doesn't know 100% what's going to happen. But the thing that I found super fascinating about what he said is he said the agent's history with Reddick is he does not advocate, it seems like, for players to hold out and not show up. That doesn't guarantee that Reddick will, but he's just revealing the history. But he said that there have been, interestingly enough, a couple of hold-in situations. That's when a player shows up to the camp and it's like, oh, actually, my hammy, I'm going to go sit down. And he doesn't actually practice. But he can't be fined because technically he's there. So it's like this new age thing. I don't know how long hold-ins have been happening, but that is something that he said has happened in the past. So that one was a fascinating nugget as some sort of insight, again, as we're a week out from the first practice and 6 days out from everyone reporting, which is on the 23rd. Have you heard anything on the Reddick situation? And what do you make of that potential holdout, hold-in situation?
Yeah, I think I haven't heard any major update, which tells me that the Jets are still working on it. When it's all quiet on the Western Front, it's usually a sign of both sides are trying to come to an agreement overall. And I do want to stress there is a week before training camp. A lot can happen in a week in terms of negotiation, in terms of agreements with these kind of extensions, particularly these sort of bridge deals that is expected for Reddick. He's not probably going to get the 4 or 5 year extension that he may have been pushing for in Philadelphia, but a 2-year bridge deal that allows him to be a free agent next year while getting the guarantees this year, something I think is far more fair to expect than anything else. A lot of time still to go before that. And I will say, in comparison, I know we've got some Mets fans here. I know a lot of people are Mets fans that follow along. Francisco Lindor signed his extension with the Mets, I believe, like at 11 o'clock the night before opening day. It was very, very quick, and it was very, very close to the deadline. So I'm not saying that that's exactly going to happen, but there is precedent to show that these deals can be agreed on right before the start of training camp to make sure that these players are brought in. I continue to say that there is no reason to be stressed for Jets fans for a number of different reasons, and I think the latest one came out earlier this week. Chris Jones talked about training camp with the Kansas City Chiefs, asking when he will report. And Patrick Mahomes gave a little sidebar on Twitter saying, oh, you got to report right away, man. Quarterbacks and receivers and everything else. And Jones made the comment that Andy Reid said the early portion of training camp is not that important for the defensive line. Because, of course, for training camp, you want to make sure the offense is ready to go. The system on defense is good and ready and capable. That's kind of where we are with Reddick and the Jets, where even if he were to sit out early on in camp, is he going to play week 1? Of course he is, because he needs to. Because if he doesn't, he's going to miss out on millions of dollars the following free agency when he's actually going to be available for a new contract. So he knows the importance of being in camp. He knows the importance of being ready for week 1, and he's going to be ready. Do I think that he could have a hold-in situation? Absolutely. We also have to remember with Reddick, this is what he did in Philadelphia last year. He sat out of off-season workouts, and he showed up to training camp. Was he involved in everything in training camp? No, but he was still there and helping the team out and being prepared for the start of the regular season. Put up another 10-sack season. Only Myles Garrett has 10-plus sacks in the last 4 years along with Reddick. So there's precedent here, not only with defensive linemen not needing to be there at the start of training camp, but also with Reddick's career that shows even if a deal isn't done in the next week, which can happen, it's not the end of the world overall because he will be playing week 1 because he has really no other choice.
Yeah, that's also, again, sorry for the technical difficulties there. That's also what Tom Pelissero sort of indicates. Like, is he playing in September? It's hard to imagine he's not. But is he practicing a week from now? Shoulder shrug. He has no idea. But again, he did talk about the potential of hold in and hold out. By the way, another big news nugget yesterday was Brandon Aiyuk officially requesting a trade. Now, there's been a lot of chatter about that all offseason. And I'm going to be honest, I smiled. I was like, woohoo, this is great. Jets play the 49ers week 1, and I don't care. Some people will say, oh, man, I want them at full strength. I don't give a flying hoot if they're at full strength, zero strength, any strength. If that helps the Jets in any which way, I don't remember a lot of people, someone wins the Super Bowl, say, I don't know, back in week 1, they did have one of those injuries. After all the injuries the Jets have dealt with over the years, and I don't hear anyone talking about any of that crap. So you know what? I flip it on the other side. But with that being said, I reacted to the Brandon Aiyuk requesting a trade as great news because that could mean that he's traded somewhere else and the 49ers are unlikely to get a player-for-player swap. We don't normally see that in the NFL. So that means they're going to get worse. It reminds me of the Jamal Adams situation before the Jets' 2-14 season. They traded him right before training camp for picks, but nothing that would help them now. They went 2-14. Of course, they traded one of their best players away. So I think it would only weaken the 49ers, which is good news. And really, the only bad thing, I guess, is if somehow he ended up with the Buffalo Bills, is what fans kept tweeting at me. And I said, well, I guess if they have the money in the coffers for that. But do you take it in the same way that this is good news for Jet fans, this Brandon Aiyuk news or no news or holdouts or anything or what?
Yeah, it's good news for teams in the NFC. I don't know if it's really going to flip the switch for the AFC unless he goes to a team like Kansas City or a team like Buffalo. And I don't see either of that happening because neither team has the cap space. I think if there's an AFC team that's going to acquire Brandon Aiyuk, it's either Pittsburgh or Pittsburgh or New England because they have a little bit more cap space than these other teams. Pittsburgh, of course, can be a contending team, Flip a coin. We have no idea what they're going to look like. It's a typical Mike Tomlin franchise. But to me, I think it's more likely that he ends up in the NFC anyway. He loves playing with Jaden Daniels. He wants to be a Commander. I think that's been pretty clear over the last few months as well. The only question is, do the 49ers let him go? I said earlier that, with Aiyuk, it would be great if the Jets could acquire him. He's younger than Devante Adams. Maybe he would cost a little bit more. Sure, that there would be issues to iron out overall. But other than that, it's really going to have no effect on the Jets because even if he goes to the Patriots, it's literally Brandon Aiyuk and nobody else on that offense. I don't trust any receiver that they have currently on the roster. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be. I love Drake May as a prospect. I think he was the best quarterback of this entire class. But they have nothing around him. And if they play him right away, they're setting him up for failure, just like the Jets did with Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold. So if the Patriots are going to make that mistake, all the power to them. There's no talent on this roster right now that is going to save the Patriots, even if Aiyuk is traded to them. Ultimately, I think this is it's a win for the Jets if he's traded before week 1. But other than that, it really will not have any major effect on the team contending for a Super Bowl in 2024.
Yeah, I'll be unbiased here. If I was Brandon Aiyuk, I would hold out. I would not stand for this nonsense, and I would hold out until at least week 2. And then I would return. Yeah.
I want him to say, you know what? Don't come into work. Don't come into work. Stay away from the 49ers. They're terrible people. Don't show up. And listen, if this causes a fracture, that's on the 49ers. That's not your fault. That's on the 49ers. Let them go 6-10 and another team in the NFC go back to being the power that they are and not have to worry about the people in the Bay Area being angry about a receiver holding out. That's not enough. That's not enough. Let the 49ers, they've had their day. Move on. Get another team up in there.
By the way, has anyone seen those documentaries Snapped? Okay, there's a pattern here. Deebo Samuel requested a trade. Now Brandon Aiyuk. What the hell is going on over there? Now, some people would point out to the Jets, didn't Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims also request a trade? And I choose not to comment on those situations. Those are all allegations at this point, and I can't speak to that. But I would say that is something certainly worth investigating. Guys, the phone lines are open. Feel free to join in. It is the pinned comment on YouTube, youtube.com/BoydGreen25. The free way to contribute, everybody. There's 400 people in the room right now. Make sure you guys like the video, hit subscribe, and also let me play the chimes at some point this show. If you join the Boy Green Coffee Club in the YouTube membership or give some away, I'd love to play them. So allow me to do so. Oh, there we go. Here we go. This won't be chimes, but I'll give you one of these. Phil with a YouTube super chat here on the show. And Phil, you went exactly where I wanted to go. Phil, I'll send you that royalty check after the program. He asked Nick, realistic to get Devante to fit under our cap? And I will also include the latest nugget here first that you can also kind of factor in is Devante Adams' agents, plural, gave a statement through Adam Schefter, and it was blunt to say the least. Let me read that statement regarding the rumors around their client Devante Adams. Quote, "This is baseless, unfounded speculation, and Devante is expected to be with the Raiders as there has been absolutely no trade talk, period." There you go on the latest hoopla, but also factor that in and hear with Phil about the Devante Adams even fitting with what the Jets have.
All right, so I said this on Twitter. I put out an article on Pro Football Network. A lot of people weren't happy about it.
Oh,
I've said on record, I will continue to say on record, he's not getting traded to the Jets during training camp because there's a number of factors that have to come into play. First off, the team has $6 million in cap space. They don't have the money to pay him right now. Now, he's counting what, $14 million on the cap? They would have to take that money on top of paying Hassan Reddick, paying Malachi Corley, which has yet to be done yet. So it's not going to happen during camp. It's not going to happen during camp. It's not going to happen before week one. We all need to sort of relax on that idea.
Sorry, Boomer Esiason, you bastard, who has said that apparently if this is going to happen, that's when it would.
But the other thing is, I think Boomer was also speculating. Like, I saw the clip as well, and it didn't seem like Boomer was saying this is going to happen then. What I heard was
reporting,
if they could, I'm sure they would like to have it then and everything else. So I think Boomer was taken out of context by a lot of people, and people jumped at just the Devante Adams name because it's Adam, it's Rodgers, it's the Jets overall. But ultimately, this isn't going to happen right away because they don't have the cap space to do it. What's going to happen in terms of order of preference is the Jets are going to create some cap space. As I've said before, they're going to create some cap space with restructures to Quinn and Williams deal, whether it's Quincy Williams as well, whether they do it with DJ Reed. There's going to be restructured deals to add cap space to give Hassan Reddick the contract that he has been looking for the last 2 years. Once that's done, in either whether it happens before or after, but Malachi Corley is also going to be re-signed. He's going to sign his rookie contract. After that, the Jets are going to look at their roster and say, okay, we have a good enough roster to compete in the AFC right now as a top 2 or 3 team in this conference. We don't need Devante Adams right now, but also on the other side, the Las Vegas Raiders are sitting there saying, okay, we may not have an answer at quarterback, but the rest of the roster is ready to compete right away. So let's see how we do with Adams as a receiver, with Gardner Minshew, with Aiden O'Connell, whoever is the starting quarterback there. Let's see how far we go. And if the Raiders are 2-5 at the time of the trade deadline or 1-6, the opportunity to trade for Devante Adams will be far higher than it would be right now. This is where I continuously say the demand for Devante Adams to be a Jet is only happening among Jets fans and Jets players. It's not happening with the Raiders. The Raiders are content because they feel that they can be a dark horse candidate to compete for a playoff spot in the AFC. No one's expecting them to win the West, but people can say that they can be a competitive roster going into next season. They went, 7-10 last year? You don't think that they can win maybe 1 or 2 more games, potentially backdoor themselves into the 7th seed? That can happen. And this is where the conversation goes and turns into, okay, if the Jets are 7-0, 8-0, 7-1, whatever it is, they're just this dominant juggernaut going into the trade deadline. Would you overpay for Devante Adams? Because that's probably what it'll have to take. If the Raiders are 4-4, 5-3, 3-5, they're not totally out of it, but they're not totally in it. They may not want to part ways with Devante Adams. But if they get a no-brainer offer because the Jets understand that this is the year to go all in. Would they take that deal? Would they take that deal if it's a first and a third round pick going to Las Vegas or 2 second-round picks? That's the question that's going to have to be answered, because unless the Raiders are a god-awful 2-5, 1-6, 0-7, he's not getting moved for pennies on the dollar. Because it's just not going to happen. So this is why I say, if you're the Jets, you don't make this trade now. You make it when you figure out what kind of team you have at the trade deadline. That's the question. Right now, we have no idea. The Raiders could be 7-0 for all we know. They've been turnarounds crazier than that. So maybe that happens and the Raiders just say, screw it. Devante Adams is completely off the market. We have no idea what it's going to look like, what the season is going to look like in 3 months. That's where I say to everyone, caution, relax, take a breather. It's not going to happen right now. It could in the future.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's play those chimes. I warned that it would come. Here we go. NFC, mother underscore effin underscore chew. NY Jets FL is finally a member of the Boy Green Coffee Club, so welcome to the party. And thank you to MFC for making that happen. That is absolutely beautiful. Oh, there you go. Thank you for the membership. He's in love with it. But he's not the only one that's in the giving gosh darn mood. What about Shadow Realm? Throw it in here. Play a minute. Scott, whoever you are, Scott, you have now also got a membership, my friend. God bless America, and God bless where you are now as a Boy Green Coffee Club member, a card-carrying member. That is gosh darn beautiful. We love to see it. And again, as the memberships come in, we'll play the chimes. But if you send in a super chat, we'll play this. And we got a super chat for Nick. We've got questions. He has answers. Ace of Spade asks, where does wide receiver Jason Brownlee stand? Can he take the leap? And before you even answer, Nick, I have to say, there has been, alarming is probably the wrong word, but it just feels right. So let me ask you, Jason Brownlee, I've heard Rich Cimini, I've heard Connor Hughes. There might be another reporter that I've also heard that have just said, whoa, dark horse, watch out for Jason Brownlee. There's apparently a lot of propaganda, a lot of fodder coming from the Jets building on the Jason Brownlee hype. So I must ask you, Nick, are you hearing the same things? Because this has been a consistent theme for the last couple of months, and I've just been like, because we obviously aren't seeing, we as fans for the most part are not seeing these practices, so we have no idea, and the media is only seeing one every couple before we get to training camp here, so it's just words, and we can't really put anything to it yet. But have you heard some of the same stuff?
I've heard it very similarly with Brownlee. I haven't seen it personally with my eyes. Okay. I wasn't there during OTAs. I was there for mandatory minicamp. And I've been sort of on this train where the undrafted free agents last year, Jason Brownlee, Xavier Gibson, these guys are a lot better than their draft stock was really touted as. And I looked at Gibson as a major winner during mandatory minicamp because he made a lot of plays in the slot. I thought he was I thought he stood out more than Brownlee during those 2-day practices. I obviously cannot speak to the opposite was during OTAs, but everything I've heard is that the undrafted rookies are going to get some playing time, and it's going to be a lot more than people think, because as talented as Malachi Corley is, and he is a tremendous talent, he still has to work on his route running, and that takes a little bit of time. It's not something that is going to be expected that he's going to walk in week one and get the ball 20 to 25 times. That's where I look and say, okay, the Jets seem to be a team that's very comfortable throwing Xavier Gibson in the slot and letting Brownlee compete with Allen Lazard for that backup role to Mike Williams if he isn't healthy to start the season. And right now, based on everything that I've seen, based on everything that I've heard, this is Jason Brownlee's spot to lose, because Allen Lazard, the contract's what it is. The disappointment is what it is. I think Brownlee is beating out Lazard in a lot of different facets right now on the outside. Granted, it's still early. Training camp has not started. Everything that we have seen about this player standing up and this player looking really good can change on a dime at the start of training camp when the pads actually come on. But as of right now, in the early stages, It's Brownlee, it's Gibson, and these guys look a hell of a lot better than they did their rookie season, and they were good enough to make the 53-man roster last year.
Oh man, that was one of my. Speaking of Hard Knocks earlier, that was one of my favorite scenes of seeing. We as fans were like, "Oh man, is it going to be Gibson or Brownlee? Boy, who's it going to be?" Surprise, motherfucker! It was both. Okay, yeah. Whoa, mama, which was again spectacular to see. And apparently, there was a fire burning in the virtual wallet of Ace of Spade, who has another question here. Play it. Everyone's talking Devante Adams, even a little bit of Aiyuk, but Ace of Spade asks, thank you for the YouTube super chat, brother. Are there any other wide receiver targets at the trade deadline that could make sense? One that's gone quiet off the top of my head is Courtland Sutton. Could that be one that potentially is floating at the deadline? Or are there even other names that we aren't thinking about? Because all it takes, especially these diva receivers, all it takes is one quick blee, blah, blue. Whoa, Tyreek Hill coming out of the door. Like, what? He's available for trade, and booyah, he was traded. So you never know. It's a very volatile position.
So Sutton's obviously a big name that I think a lot of people are going to look out for. The other is the duo of wideouts in Seattle, whether it's Metcalf, whether it's Lockett. I'm very interested to see what the Seahawks do because the NFC West is a very, very talented division. And the NFC is going to be very crowded for a playoff spot this year. If the Seahawks are out of it, Metcalf wants a new deal. Lockett's getting up there in age. Could they try and create sort of a mini rebuild with this new coaching staff and get rid of one of these receivers and ship them off to a place like New York for the Jets? That's going to be something to look out for. The one thing that I will stress is wide receiver targets at this stage in terms of the trade deadline, it's a little early because we don't know how the season's going to go. If a team is really, really bad, take the Cowboys, for example. If the Cowboys are in shambles and they go and they're like 1-5 to start the year, 2-5 to start the year, could Brandon Cooks be available for a potential deal, a potential trade? Sure. That's another name that you could be looking out for. But if the Cowboys are 6-2, are they going to be looking to sell? Of course not. So it really just comes down to which teams are in contention for the playoffs and which teams are clearly trying to sell the rest of the year. That's why the trade deadline was pushed back a week to sort of give these teams an extra week to determine who they are as an organization for the rest of the year. So yes, targets to look out for. I think the people in the duo in Seattle is one to look out for. I think maybe one of Green Bay's full quartet of receivers overall could be up for debate, depending. Yes, Courtland Sutton, Devante Adams. There's a lot of names that you can look at, but if they're not in contention, if they are in contention, that obviously changes a lot overall.
Very fair point. A little early. We are 4 months out from the NFL trade deadline. So, yes, that is a very astute point for all the people saying, ooh, trade deadline. Well, we're 4 months out, and the teams are going to win, lose, and everything in between. Which
goes back to the Adams thing. As much as Jets fans can be excited about Devante Adams, and listen, I have seen my team trade God knows what for pennies on the dollar. I've seen it happen live. So I am never going to discount anything, count anything out. Objectively, and I mean this as fair as I can.
Yeah.
Objectively, what all-pro receiver gets moved during training camp? This doesn't happen. It's just not going to happen because the Raiders think that they can be competitive. And no team wants to get rid of one of their best players a week or two before the season starts. So it's hard for me to look at any trade and say, oh, this is going to happen. Keep an eye on the trade deadline when the trade deadline is being pushed into late October, early November. So it's just something I have a hard time grasping, at least right now in this stage of the NFL season.
Fair enough. I will also say, when you said, what if the Cowboys are 2-6, and I start going, yeah, say it. And then you're like, Brandon Cooks. I'm like, oh, geez. Yeah, because you start building me up. I'm like, okay.
No one is happier. Yeah. No one's happier if CeeDee Lamb leaves Dallas than me.
Oh, that's a good point.
No one would be happier to see that happen. And listen, the Cowboys don't want to pay any of their great players. They have all these great players. They don't want to pay any of them. But eventually these deals are going to be agreed upon.
Yes.
Whether Prescott's the odd man out, whether it's Micah Parsons that's the odd man out, that remains to be seen. But I have a very hard time believing that CeeDee Lamb is going to be walking out the door in Dallas anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm there with you, but I was just hoping that you would will it into existence. CD Lamb chat. Oh boy, it would be spectacular. He's not going.
I'd be cheering it. I might wear a Jets hat for that if that trade were to go down. I never wear opposing teams' gear. I might be waving a flag, putting a Jets hat on if they can somehow get CeeDee Lamb out of Dallas and outside of the NFC East. That happens, and I will actually wear another team's jersey happily.
Wow. Okay, fans, you've heard it. Let's do our praying before bed every night to see if we can get Lamb Chop anywhere specifically, but try to get him there as well. All right, we got a couple of calls. Let's jump on over there. Thank you everybody for the super chats and membership so far. Let's keep this party rolling. Let's go to my boy Brandon in the car. What's up, Brandon?
What's up, man? How are y'all doing today?
Great.
Good.
Good deal. Well, I definitely agree with Nick on the whole Devante Adams situation. As I was calling in, Nick was kind of reeling off what I was going to say, where we just kind of need to be patient right now and probably focus on getting Hassan Reddick taken care of. And, I don't think after we look at our roster and we kind of see what our guys are doing, I think we're going to be like, do we really need Devante Adams? That's how I feel. That being said, if something crazy happened and we got Devante Adams, I'd be losing my shit. So I'm like, but I think we've got a really good depth at wide receiver. I'm guessing we're going to say probably Wilson. I can't ever remember the guy we just signed.
Mike Williams. That's okay. Mike Williams. Yeah. Yep.
And Malachi Corley, Lazard, Gibson, and Brownlee. Is that who we're thinking right now is going to be probably our guys going into
Irv Charles is going to make the roster, but more as a special teams guy than anything else. So I think there's a chance that you have another 7 at least going in for the 53-man roster.
Okay. That's what. Okay, yeah, I'm down with that. And then also just a couple questions at depth. So I'm pretty confident. I don't want to really say this, but if something did happen with Rodgers, I'm pretty sure Tyrod Taylor could take over. I think he could handle it. I think, throw it up in the air and say, I got 5 on it, and Wilson come down, I think we'll be good with Tyrod Taylor. But now I do have a question with, say something with Reddick comes up. Is Will McDonald, is he the guy next up, or is he looking good, or what? Do we have any info on Will McDonald?
They're high on McDonald right now, and there's no reason not to be. He had more sacks his rookie year than Jermaine Johnson, and there's no reason to think that his speed is a better fit for what the Jets want to do defensively than Johnson's overall complete game. I think McDonald's going to have a big year, even with Reddick on the field, because the Jets want to play their pass rushers in waves, and there's going to be times where they want to put Jermaine Johnson inside against a guard and have Will McDonald play in Johnson's old spot. And you have a defensive line rushing the passer of Quinn Williams, Hassan Reddick, Jermaine Johnson, and Will McDonald. I will take that matchup against most offensive lines in the NFL. And that's kind of where I'm at with this. It's not, we have to worry about Reddick's health. It's more of just the depth on this defensive line is perfectly fine, even after the trade of John Franklin Myers.
Yep. I agree. I enjoy your takes, Nick. Paul, thanks for having me. Appreciate the show. Love the show. Y'all be good.
I appreciate it, Brandon. And again, I'm going to be thinking about that song all day now. 5 on it. Oh, phenomenal tunes. But let me ask you what Brandon said, because I think there is I love Matthew Berry, who does fantasy football. He mentions this kind of phrasing all the time. What is within the realm of possibilities with players? Like, oh, wow, Garrett Wilson could have a realm of possibilities being a top 5 receiver. There's a realm of possibilities that could do this. So it's kind of determining floor ceiling and percentages and things. It's a really interesting way to look at it. what Brandon said, what percentage would you put on that? Would you put 5 on it? Or something perhaps even larger, which is that the Jets don't need Devante Adams, is what I'm saying. Is that everything works out. Garrett Wilson's healthy. He looks like the breakout. All he needed was a quarterback the whole time. Mike Williams is healthy, and he looks great. Corley doesn't have the rough rookie transition that some people think he will from college to the pros, and Lazard bounce back and all this other stuff. Because then at that point, you're like, where would Devante Adams even fit? That might be disruptive, quite frankly. If everything's vibing and everything's going well, adding him could be complicated. Again, that's a great way to think of it if it goes that way. What are the chances realistically that that's possible?
Slim. And
I see.
And I'll say overall, when we dissect a team's roster, and I've kind of learned this as well through my time watching football as a fan and also as a reporter. Just because a team has a good roster or a good depth chart players does not mean that it's always going to work out exactly the way everyone thinks. So Garrett Wilson can be the number one receiver that everyone is anticipating, and he already kind of is. No one's debating that he won't, and I think he's going to take a massive step this year. I've been on the record saying he's going to set the targets record in NFL history at 205. I think he's going to blow through that. But outside of that, is it fair to assume that Mike Williams is going to be back at 100% after an ACL injury, particularly when ACL injuries take about 2 years to fully get back to full strength? It's hard for me to say that. I'm not comfortable putting a bet down on that happening. Are we comfortable with Allen Lazard looking competent in this offense with Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback? Sure, he's done that before in Green Bay, but it's not like he was this great player in OTAs. He struggled a lot too with drops, with separation issues overall. It's not like he's a different player this offseason than he was last year. And you have Gibson and Brownlee, and they've looked really, really good. But what is really, really good to undrafted free agents? We don't know what that is going to look like on an NFL field for football Sunday. So there are still a lot of questions for the Jets receiving core. They are deep. There's a lot of guys that they can trust. But to say that this group is going to be a top 10 group right away, I think is overreaching just a little bit, because we don't know the health of some of these guys. We don't know what the UDFAs are going to look like. So ultimately, a guy like Devante Adams, you throw in there no matter what, because it kind of like what the Rams did with Odell Beckham Jr. The Rams didn't need Odell. They didn't need him, but they brought him in because he's another piece that they can add to the puzzle. That would be kind of the similar thought process as the Jets would have with Devante Adams overall. And, you know, I said this before, and I know that the Brandon kind of asked this as well about Tyron Smith, saying that Jets fans should be able to trust Tyron Smith in case something happens with Rodgers. But also, how many times do backup quarterbacks lead their teams to the playoffs if they have to play more than 3 games? It's really slim. It's really, really slim. And listen, Tyrod Taylor is the best backup quarterback out there. I've said this before. Are we really sure that he can win 5, 6, 7 games if he needs to? This is kind of my point of, we overvalue certain positions and certain players because of the position they play. Mike Williams, when healthy, is a great deep threat wide receiver. Is he healthy enough for fans to expect that out of him this year? No, it's just not. It's not fair to him to throw out there and say, you need to put up 800 yards and 20 yards per reception, because he's not going to be 100%. The same thing with Tyrod Taylor. If Tyrod Taylor's playing 2 or 3 games, can he go 2-1? Absolutely. We've seen backup quarterbacks do that before, but the shelf life of a backup quarterback is so small compared to starters. This is where I say the expectations of where the Jets are in totality may be a lot different than what we expect for some of these players individually. This team's really talented. They should be competing for a Super Bowl. But that doesn't mean every player is going to have this breakout year, this breakout campaign that everyone's waiting for.
Fair enough. That's a good way to put it. Okay, before we get to the phone lines, we got another caller, but we also have another member of the Boy Green Gosh Darn Coffee Club. Shout out to Card Cave Central. We'll do it again. And Tony, No, you are now a part of the Boy Green Coffee Club. Welcome to the show, you handsome bastard. Welcome. It's great, and thank you. There he goes. A shout out to Card Cave Central. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Thank you, CCC, for that. That's very nice of you. Let's go to Hep in the car. What's up, brother?
Hey, guys. I just want to say I think everything's lining up for us for a change. I mean, we really want to run heavy with Brees at the beginning anyway, just also to alleviate any pressure on Rodgers. And by then, I think we need Devante, even if it's just for the playoff. In the playoffs, I mean, we'll be unstoppable with those two, with G-Dub and Devante. The other thing I like to say is I like what you're doing, Paul. I like you going after the national markets and getting your name out there. It's a good strategy. They're going to pick you up, man.
All right. Hey, I'm all about, I love the Rich Eisen show, so that's great. So I will try to call in as much as I can. No doubt about it. But thank you for the shout out, brother.
Okay. See you guys. Have a good day.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Hep, for joining us. And quickly, two things here. First off, Card Cave Central saying someone gifted me a membership. Must have missed it. Thank you for who gifted it to me. I love it. Hashtag pay it forward, baby. That's a great thing to do in life, and it's a great thing to do for the membership game. So appreciate that. And there was a question all the way at the beginning of the show, Nick. So there's been two topics that every time you come on the show, every week we're like, so Reddick, what's up? And then the other one is Corley unsigned. What's up? And that one's becoming more a thing because there was only, I think Schefter tweeted it out, there was a list of like 10 at the beginning of the week, 10 rookies of the 257, whatever the number is, of 257 that were unsigned. But now that list is getting shorter and shorter because Caleb signed this week, and I saw Roma Dunze signed this week. So now the number's down to like 7 or 6, and Corley is weirdly one of those guys. Rookies report tomorrow. Is there anything to worry about here, or that's getting banged out tomorrow or over the coming days?
Whether it happens tomorrow, whether it happens next week, it's going to happen. And this is, again, rookie contracts. We have to remember they are rated out specifically to where these players are drafted. The one question is if a player wants a contract that's fully guaranteed, or if there's other incentive-based programs that they feel is unfair they want to get rid of and throw it into a signing bonus. Outside of that, there's really not much to negotiate. This deal is going to get done. It's just a matter of when. And this is where I'll say the Jets not having Corley signed is going to be a running joke for the national media if he's not re-signed by the start of training camp. But ultimately, this is not some outlandish thing. There's been holdouts before from rookies. This is not some crazy conspiracy that the Jets are poorly run. It is quite literally just this. It's just based on guaranteed money. It's based on the incentives. Once they come to an agreement, and they probably will within the first 1 to 2 weeks, if not already, everything will be taken care of eventually.
All right, there you go. So I saw a lot of questions about it today. Again, I kept putting it. I'm like, okay, I'll get to that. Just Corley, what's going on, Corley? Hey, Corley, where are you? And I'm like, okay, I'll get to it with Nick. So again, Corley is one of, it is a limited list. So, but somebody has to be the limited. Someone has to be like last in the dance to the last couple. I'm sure Jet fans just hate that they are one of the ones that are on the list, but it just is what it is. As Corley is the final Jets draft pick that is yet to be signed. But again, we're a week away from the first practice, and then 6 days away from the veterans reporting. Again, rookies report tomorrow.
But again, like the other thing with that is the national media is going to run with it regardless. It's the Jets, poorly run. Oh my God, the LOL Jets, whatever it is. Objectively, if people want to look at it from an objective lens and realize what exactly is being talked about, it's a non-issue. Rookies are always going to get signed. They're not going to miss portions of the regular season because Corley needs to be able to play. He needs to be able to practice to be able to develop into the kind of Deebo Samuel receiver that people are expecting him to be. I think he's going to be perfectly fine, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's a week from now, whether it's 2 weeks from now. The month of July is not something to worry about in terms of a player being ready for the start of the regular season. Let's just put it that way.
Fair enough. And to the 500 people in the room, make sure you guys like the video, hit subscribe, and we appreciate all you guys who watch or listen after the fact as well. Nick, before we get you out of here, again, plugs, baby. You're everywhere. You're Pro Football Network. You're Athlon Sports. Everywhere that you are, and plus, of course, your handle on the screen for those who are watching. What do you have cooking? What's coming up here as we have training camp right on top of us next week for the Jets?
rolling out a bunch of content for previews on Athlon. I will most likely be at the start of training camp next week, so you guys will have like last year's breaking stuff throughout the practices. I'll have practice reports out, so full court press on content coming out within the next week or so, and continuing to work for you guys. It's really been an honor seeing all you Jet fans follow me around and comment on my stuff. So it's greatly appreciated.
Guys, see the tweets. Again, for those who are also listening, it is Nick_Faria1720. Make sure you guys hit it and get all the latest juicy deets from my boy Nick. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for Boy Green Daily. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Appreciate it.